Funding for the river, Living the St. Lawrence, provided by Mattress Express, your instant comfort number bed dealer for Northern and Central New York. Online at mattressexpressny.com. Marble Key Realty, there for you 24/7, serving the unique needs of North Country homeowners. Online at marblekey.com. Big Apple Music, your car audio specialist, who also specialize in custom home theater and business networking. Online at rockedbybigapple.com. Armageddon Arsenal Supply, exercising our Second Amendment rights, located on Route 11 near the Fort Drum main gate. Tremblay's Handyman Services, supporting production of the River, Living the St. Lawrence series. And by Lake Ontario Realty. Serving the region for 18 years, Lake Ontario Realty is once again the volume leader in Northern New York for the 4th straight year. Serving all of Northern New York, including the St. Lawrence River and the Eastern Ontario communities. See them on Facebook and online at lakeontariorealty.com.
Today on the river, Living the St. Lawrence. Josh Todd, Alex Hammond, and Glenn Curry talk about how great the fishing is in the St. Lawrence River.
The Seaway brought these Russian ships that bring this invasive species and then making these huge bass that anglers can't believe that they're catching. 15 years later, here we are, and everyone's like, oh, the gobies are great. That's what keeps these bass huge. So
find out why fishing in the St. Lawrence has gotten top honors from a major name.
Abu Garcia stated that the St. Lawrence River has the best fishing in America. Did you hear about that, Alex?
Different people have ranked us the best fishing, best bass fishing, all these different things, and it's because they come here and they catch bass bigger than anywhere in the world.
That's today on this episode of The River, Living the St. Lawrence. Hello everyone, I'm Lori Doldo. Producers Josh Todd and Alex Hammond wanted to create a show that was solely dedicated to the St. Lawrence River. That's why they created a roundtable discussion with host Glenn Curry to talk about the river's rich history, its contributions to world trade, and its growing popularity with the best anglers on the planet. Let's join in on the conversation.
This is the most exciting thing, guys. I read recently that Abu Garcia stated that the St. Lawrence River has the best fishing in America. Did you hear about that, Alex?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, it's one of those things where different people have ranked us the best fishing, best bass fishing, all these different things, and it's because they come here and they catch bass bigger than anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. I think it's partly because of the gobies, which is another thing. The Seaway brought these Russian ships that bring this invasive species, and then initially we were like, oh my god, the goby, because they were eating all of the walleye eggs, and then it's been the exact opposite now. Now the bass and the walleye are completely eating them because that's part of their ecosystem now, I guess, and making these huge bass that anglers can't believe that they're catching here. I mean, I'm not that old, but I remember when I was coming up, 10 years old fishing, if you caught a goby, you were supposed to kill it. Like, oh, that's a piece of crap fish. Like, kill it. They're eating all the walleye eggs and stuff. And now, 15 years later, here we are, and everyone's like, oh, the gobies are great. That's what keeps these bass huge. So
Waddington had the Bass Masters tournament, but due to COVID, it was moved to Clayton. Why was that, Alex?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go back a little bit here. So 2013 was the first time we had the tournament in Waddington. It was a huge, huge thing. Nothing like this had ever been done. The governor flew up. It was great. They loved it so much, they came back 2 years later, 2015. Loved it so much again, they came back 2017. In 2017, they signed a 3-year contract. And it was the first 3-year contract Bass had ever signed, because usually they try to, space it out, go to different places. But the anglers loved it so much in Waddington, and specifically on the St. Lawrence River, that they just wanted to stay in Waddington and keep coming back every year. So we had that contract signed. They came back in 2018, 2019, and then 2020 hit, and it was the last year of our contract. Unfortunately, COVID-19 happened. So fortunately, Jefferson County, their public health had a little bit of different, what would you call it? Regulations.
Parameters to work by.
Yeah. So Clayton stepped up to the plate. And what I love about it is it saved the tournament from still happening.
Right.
And it still happened on the St. Lawrence River, and they still caught those same type of fish. Guess what? Anglers were still driving their boats from Waddington all the way down to Clayton.
Oh, yeah.
And even in the first tournament, there was one guy who won was going all the way to the lake.
Yeah,
and they changed the tournament rules that you couldn't go to the lake anymore because that guy would just go all the way to the lake, fish for 45 minutes, and drive all the way back, and he'd catch the most bass in the biggest limit.
When it was in Waddington.
When it was in Waddington
Wow.
in 2013. Yep. The winner that year would drive whatever it was, 4 hours down the river to go to the
long
lake.
ways,
And then all the way back. And he only had about an hour of fishing. And he caught he won that year.
Right.
So they changed the rules, kept it exactly on the river so you couldn't go into the lakes. And it's great. It's just a great thing for Waddington. It's a great thing for the entire river and the communities that surround it.
But that's interesting, Alex, because last year they went as far as Henderson and Sackett's Harbor, some of the fishermen. So
Right.
but because they were in Clayton, would that mean since the proximity to the lake, they were allowed to do it last year?
I'm sure they had some rule changes due to COVID and everything like that. But I think just because so you can't go past Messina,
Right.
up where we are. So everything is technically up the river, right? Everything's up the river, Clayton, A Bay, everything up that way. So you can't really go south, or I guess it's technically northeast, up the river, down the river to Messina. So the thing with Waddington is, if we're getting into the history here,
Sure. No doubt.
The Seaway has created what we have in Waddington. The reason why we have the place that we can actually hold the festival is because it's all owned by the New York State Power Authority. There wasn't anything allowed to be built on it because it's New York State owned property. That's something that has been a bone of contention in Waddington and other affected communities over the years. But now when you see that we have this huge park that's, I can't even tell you how many acres that is, probably 20 or 30 acres of just a park that you can set up trailers and tents and this huge festival. This is all pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID. It's changed people's perception of the Power Authority in Waddington and of the state in Waddington and of these bass anglers. It's great. Before there was a lot of animosity. We lost an entire street of our village, and I'd say probably close to 50 homes because the Power Authority had to come through with the Seaway in 1955 and buy out those properties and expand the river so that we could have the shipping channel. So I think now we're finally seeing, instead of people saying, oh, they took our land, now they're saying, I wouldn't say thank God they took our land, but because they took our land,
Right.
now we're reaping the benefits now because places like Clayton, places like Ogdensburg that didn't get affected by this, by the Seaway, don't really have the same type of facilities on the land as we do because of the help from the Power Authority and the Seaway.
So Waddington has the 3-year contract for the Bassmasters, but will it ever come back to Clayton, Alex?
So I know Clayton is trying, and I support them.
Big
But
time.
being from Waddington, I can tell you we are holding the Bassmaster tournament this year, the Elite Series.
Gotcha.
July, I think it's middle of July. We're holding that. We've been in talks. Obviously, with COVID, it's a different ball game, but the plan is to plan as if we were going to hold this tomorrow, and hopefully less and less restrictions will be in place by the time we get there. So there's a bunch of stuff going on, but I think the coolest part about the talks right now, as far as holding it in Waddington, is it's never really brought people downtown. It's brought people to Whitaker Park, which is the park I was just explaining. That's a good 20 acres. With the COVID restrictions, looking at the glass half full, you can have more people at the event if there isn't food at the event. So what we're thinking about is actually having food vendors and whatnot on Main Street with some type of shuttle system.
Right.
So you can have you can maximize the people you can have down at the actual weigh-ins and watching the boats go out, and then shuttle them when they need food and beverage to our downtown Main Street, so that they can utilize the property down there, utilize the vendors down there, and then, this might be getting ahead of myself here, but that's also why we're looking at building the marina at the end of Main Street in Waddington, because right now we have about, give or take 30 boat slips, and we're looking to double that in order to kind of ramp ourselves out of this pandemic.
So at the end of the day, Alex, this increases fishing traffic big time, and you're getting fishermen from all over the country. And as far as the Bassmasters Elite Tournament is concerned, you're getting them from all over the world. We saw a couple of fishermen from Japan, and they were very elated with the area. They seemed like the next tournament, by the way, was in Burlington on Lake Champlain. It didn't seem like they wanted to go there. They wanted to stick around here. That's what I noticed, at least.
Yeah.
So it was great weather, but the other factor is that they weren't allowed to go on the Canadian side. Without COVID, could they also fish on the other side of the channel, Alex?
So the thing is and you might want to ask the Border Patrol guy here, but specifically, from what I know, as long as they don't turn off their engine, and that might be a new thing that they changed, but I know they can fish the channel. They can't, obviously, dock or anything like that.
Yes, so the big contention is whether you can go fish in those fisheries without actually having to anchor. Anchor is when you make a actual landfall. As far as the anglers go and any other international traffic, you can go back and forth. As long as you don't make anchor or any kind of landfall, you're good to go.
Interesting. All right, so then once everything comes back to normal, so to speak, that they'll be able to fish on both sides then.
Which would be huge, because I know there's lots of good places to find some tiny little bays and scoop up some fish on the Canadian side.
I mean, again, it's the same river on either side, but are there better areas to fish by? Like near Clayton, they were talking about certain areas where there's more fish, or does it really matter at the end of the day?
I'm sure it does, and to someone who is more of an expert than I'm positive it does. I like to catch largemouth, which isn't what you find big ones of on the St. Lawrence River, but I really like topwater fishing. I like to see the fish attack. I think that's what gets my adrenaline pumping. I always look for more shallow bays that are shaded. I think that's what any bass fisherman would probably tell you. But if you want to get the big smallmouth, you're going to do some type of drop shot right on, where there's a drop off, which with the Seaway, again, there's so many drop offs because there's what they had to cut out. And then there's the original,
what nature made. Yeah, sure.
So in Waddington, there's a place that me and my buddy, we used to kayak out to, and it's on the American side, so we could anchor. And we'd anchor with cinder blocks in a kayak, and we just sit there with minnows all day, and you could watch the drop shot go down, and drop shot is just a hook with some type of bait and a sinker, and it goes straight down, and you could see just where that shallow would meet the deep, and as soon as it got dark, that's where you'd want it to be, and boom, you just get hit every time. And somehow my buddy, who was using the same bait as me, right next to me, could catch his limit, and I could catch like maybe one or two.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's the luck of the draw, right, Alex? I mean, really, you could literally have the same bait be in the same spot, but get different results.
I think there's something about the talent, though. There is something about someone who, I mean, these people are for better or worse, whatever you want to call them, they are sportsmen. They are good at what they do. Some of these people went to college and were on college teams in order to, then get into the pros, just like you would in basketball or hockey or anything like that. I think what's cool about fishing is it's just like what I think is like golf. Anybody can do it at any age. And, as long as you can still swing the club or get the fishing.
One thing I noticed about the Bassmasters tournament, there was one guy, I forget where he was from, and he was literally fishing underneath people's docks outside Clayton. And in fact, he was talking to them. Someone gave him a sandwich. Just flew. I said, "Do you realize you're on ESPN right now?" So here it is. And he came into the top 10. I think he came in like a 5th or 6th. But he was catching 6-pound bass underneath people's docks, whereas other people were in the channel, up in other areas, some out in the lake and whatnot. But he had this thing about docks. What's that all about? Why? Did he know something other people didn't take advantage of, or what?
When I was a kid, I had a babysitter, and right across the road was a tributary of the St. Lawrence. So it was like, I think it's Little Sucker Brook in Waddington. And I could sit on their dock and cast to the dock 10 feet from me with a daredevil lure and catch northern pike all day long. Huge northern pike that you wouldn't believe would be under that dock. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing it's shade. I'm guessing it's shallow, but it's also a very quick, I mean, the reason why you put a dock out is so that you can get your boat up there and then quickly get out to deeper water, right? So I'm guessing that it's probably the same thing with the fish. They can come up and, somehow feed and whatever they're feeding on and be in the shade. And if they need, quick way to get out, they're out of there.
Well, he was catching them, that's for sure.
Right.
And he became somewhat of a celebrity as a result of that because, again, you see spectator sports like football, basketball, especially, where the fans are right there. So it was very exciting. The knowing, of course, that the river is very wide, very deep, and not to mention the lake, but to see that the engagement, if you will, between the fans and the actual fishermen, which was awesome. But here's the thing, Abu Garcia says the best fishing in the country. That's a huge thing. And then we say, all right, how do we capitalize on that? I mean, do we go to I Love New York and get the bed tax money driven towards our area? Say, look what Abu Garcia said. Look what's happening to our fish. They're getting bigger up here. More and more people are staying in their state, staying within 300 miles from where they live now because of COVID-19. So where do you start, Alex? Where do you start to promote the fact that this is now a fishing mecca of the United States?
Well, the greatest part about it is these Bassmaster folks have been praising this area since 2013. So it's already really started. Like I said, these are sportsmen. These are athletes, right? These anglers are saying this is the best place, like you just said, this is the best place for fishing in the country, in the world. You go to a boat launch and just see the different state license plates that you see.
Exactly.
And I remember a huge bone of contention at the beginning of COVID. For some reason, one of the restrictions was you couldn't go boating. You couldn't go boating. You couldn't go fishing. It lasted for about maybe 2 days.
Yes, before.
And then it was retracted.
Right, right.
I think the way we start on capitalizing is obviously laying that groundwork, but things like this marina that we're trying to do in Waddington, access to the water, access to fishing locations. That's one thing, like I said, again, if you really wanted to, and there's going to be a lot of property owners that aren't going to like me for saying this, if there's any place in the affected zone that you want to go fishing off the bank, whether it's in someone's supposed backyard, the Power Authority owns from the water 25 feet in. So if you go anywhere along the river within the affected zone, which is from Messina all the way down to Lisbon, and you take your boat and you pull it up to someone's supposed backyard that they might have groomed for the last 50 years, you have this right to be there and fish on that ledge as long as it's 25 feet from the water. And that's one place that I guarantee there's no other place in the country. When carp fishing was the first big thing, the Brits would come over, and that's what they always said. Oh, if we have to pay private people to go on their property and fish their ponds and fish their lakes and rivers, over here it's all free. I'm like, well, that's why we had the American Revolution in the first place.
Right.
Now, they do that 25 feet from the shore, or is it 25 feet from the center of the channel per the seaway? Do you know?
Nope, from the water.
From the
so like where the
shoreline.
water, from the shoreline, it's 25 feet. So that's why walking trails and whatnot are so easy to put in, because you don't have to go through. I mean, it'd be nice to let the people know that essentially in their backyard there's going to be a walking trail or a dock or something like that. But at the end of the day, the New York State Power Authority, which means the people of New York State, own 25 feet to the water in the affected zone.
And are the Brits still coming?
They are. Carp fishing is still a huge thing up here. It's been put to the side a little bit because of how crazy the bass fishing has just exploded.
Right.
But same thing with walleye. Walleye are bigger than they ever were, and they were, I wouldn't say on the verge of extinction, but people were talking about how scarce they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, I know. They were huge when I first got, not to mention bullheads.
Yeah.
What happened to bullheads? I don't hear about bullheads anymore. I mean, am I missing something?
Just Black Lake now. But.
Yeah, I mean, they're easy to fit. They're easy to catch, right? I mean, you put it on a worm and you throw it in any body of water, and you're probably going to catch either a perch or a bullhead off of it. But I mean, they don't quite fight like a bass does. They don't quite fight like a carp is just a huge ton of a fish. And to bring one of those in, I mean, the pole is like 5 times the length of a regular pole. You're using braided line. It's
like
it's
you're catching a shark.
Yeah, really. And the Brits are still coming. I mean, I live right across the road from Main Street Perk, the new bakery in Waddington. And you'll walk over there and you'll hear British accents.
Really?
And it's like, where are these guys coming from? And then you get the local guy that you know is the big carp guy.
Right.
He's showing them around. He's
Isn't
showing
that-
them where to go. So.
But what's the fascination with carp? I thought that wasn't good eating fish, or is it just this?
It's
Just
the fight.
Just the fight itself.
Just the fight itself. And it's always, I've really never seen anyone come to Waddington unless they were bow hunting the fish, like the, whatever they call that, bow fishing.
Yeah.
To try to eat the carp. It's always the fight, and they always are trying to do catch and release. Like if you meet an actual very, skilled carp fisherman, I'm not exaggerating. It would bring a tear to their eye if they killed the carp that they caught.
Oh, I'm sure.
They want that carp to go back in and, be caught by someone else. And we have
For another fight for another day.
yeah, exactly. And we have the youth fishing tournament in Waddington for the
Right.
carp for St.
Right.
Lawrence County.
Right.
And that's amazing. Well, first of all, it's a huge fight for an average, male adult, right? You got these kids. You can't be in this tournament unless
Right.
you're 18
That's a
years
swordfish.
age.
Yeah.
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 And it's great. I did it every year. Every year when I was a kid, I did that.
Well, okay, so you're a young guy, and 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer than that someone from Harry Potter came down from Britain. He was like the celebrity sponsor of the event.
Tom Felton.
Okay, so explain that. So there is a British connection here.
Yeah.
So when you talk to British fishermen, when you bring up Waddington or the St. Lawrence River, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. It's the carp haven of the world, I guess,
Right.
to them.
Yeah.
So they bring down this kid who I didn't know, by the way, but everybody else did. But he was the reason why a lot of people were, gravitated to that, especially the young kids, because they need some celebrity snob appeal, if you will,
Right.
some celebrity endorsement. So there was it was no secret that would be a good way to attract younger kids to the carp tournament, and that went very, very well. Were you a part of that as a young man?
I
Were you-
was. So Tom Felton played Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter series. And he came to Waddington. I actually got to meet him twice. Once was, I think, a Channel 7 News did an article, and they had an interview and what it meant to me to be a carp fisherman and, all that kind of stuff. And the other one was they held this opening ceremony in Messina. It was Messina Central School in the auditorium. And I was part of the Cub Scouts at that time. And we gave him a patch. We gave him some type of patch and thanked him for coming. And I know my mom has those both on video that needs to be put over to DVD or whatever it is now.
You should.
But I was part of that, to be and the funny part about it was he was the villain in Harry Potter, right? He was Harry Potter's arch nemesis,
Right.
which if you keep watching the movies doesn't happen to be sort of towards the end, spoiler alert, but,
We got to leave now.
but growing up, that it was oh, he's the bad guy. But then you met him and you're oh, he's just an actor and he's acting a part.
Right.
And he came up here, he coyote hunted. He did a bunch of different stuff, but the biggest thing that obviously attracted the kids to the sport was the carp fishing.
And they will have that tournament once again once COVID is over. So carp tournament for all ages, I'm assuming kids as well, will resume on the St. Lawrence.
Yeah, they actually did have an adult tournament last year during COVID, and they plan on having that one again this year and the children's one this year. I think they have some COVID guidelines that they can follow in order to do that.
Sure.
And the Bass Masters is going to happen. I think Messina's expecting four coming in this year.
That's what they were saying when on the latest. Again,
Yeah.
the new tournaments. So the sky is the limit. But again, I know I asked earlier, guys. But at the end of the day, how can we get the whole world to respond to this? Do we have enough hotel rooms on the river?
No.
That's always been a question about. A lot of hotels over the years obviously have fallen due to old just disrepair or fires and whatnot. But even so, we need modern facilities to up to code and so forth. The River Edge, perfect example. The new hotel in Clayton. What's the name of it again?
The Harbor Hotel. I think?
Harbor
Yep.
Hotel. A family out of Western New York. They have several of them, and they looked at that area with bated breath. We got to be up in Clayton. And as a result of that, Clayton has gotten a lot more attention in recent days. So, do we have again? And as far as bed tax are concerned, it's all commensurate with the amount of bed or available hotels and rooms. Do we have enough to promote this on I Love New York promotions? We see Bolt Castle quite a bit. Every now and then you'll say, "Oh, Bolt Castle, that's great," and then they go over to Western New York. Now, again, we're seeing that because we know Bolt Castle. Our New Yorkers in other areas of the East Coast, Boston, Philadelphia, how can we reach them and the masses to let them know that the fishing haven of the planet, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that,
There you
because
go.
when you hear Abu Garcia say it's the best in the country, how do we get the resources and the mindset together, not to mention the money to make this happen, Alex?
It is a question.
It's a big question.
It is a
But it's an opportunity too,
I'm
Josh.
curious that the VRBOs have taken off. I've talked to a couple of people along the river. They're booked out a year in advance.
Amazing.
But we don't have the hotels, the cookie cutter places for people to stay.
Right.
But the VRBOs are taking off. I'm curious if the families travel with the fishermen. I'm not too familiar with that.
So in Waddington, the first year, not a lot of them did.
Okay.
Over the years, that now that they've known what Waddington can offer and that there's actually things that people can do while they're out fishing.
That's the kind
what
of
their
route
families can do.
that I'm going. If the families are traveling, if you could expand just the knowledge of what the river has to offer outside of castles.
Right.
Although that would be a good trip for the families to see as well. But when they're not fishing, do they have shopping? Do they have places to go recreate?
Right.
And do things that the family can enjoy. Even when the fisherman's not fishing, he can go out
Right.
and see what the river has to offer. I think I grew up 7 miles from the river and barely stepped foot on it as a young man and didn't know anything about it because we just weren't didn't have the opportunity to go out on boating and whatnot.
And now he works for the Border Patrol.
Yes.
So what does that tell you?
So just unconscious incompetence, right? They just don't know what's out there. So if you could spread the word and highlight a couple of things that would pique people's interest, I think that would definitely bring more, if not internet traffic to the area, and then by that way would bring some people up to the area to check it out.
And it sounds too simple and almost too easy. And I guess what I'm also going to say is long, but you get that one family that comes here and falls in love. They buy a house.
Right.
They tell their friends and family.
Right.
They bring them up here every year. The next generation buys a house up here. It's in the other thing that we're blessed with up here is, might not be for the people who have lived here all our lives, but compared to the rest of the world, we have a pretty low tax rate, especially for New York State.
And property values.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I can buy a house on the water for $250,000. Like, what?
They'll buy it on sight unseen in many cases.
In cash.
It's an amusement park that's created by nature.
Right.
That is free to enjoy.
Right.
And that's what's drawn me to the river. It's back at the turn of the century, you had the steel barons and the oil barons that would build big castles and sprawling complexes, but you could have the guy that's on a canoe with a sail and set it up and enjoy the very same area that the rich people are. So it's not a class thing. It's just the river ever runs through, and you can take advantage of it just like air.
And that's just
you just
like
have to know it's there and what's out
the American story right
American
there, right?
story,
Why did we start this in the first place? Because the king could only shoot the king's deer.
Exactly.
So now we are in the wild, and it's everyone's deer. Whoever can actually shoot it.
Fishing has always been a major part of the river's history, and as you heard from today's discussion, the fish are bigger and more plentiful than ever. That's just one of the many reasons why the St. Lawrence is the greatest river in the world. But wait, Josh, Alex, and Glenn aren't done talking about fishing the St. Lawrence. They continue that discussion on part 2 of Fishing the St. Lawrence. So be sure to tune in then. I'm Lori Doldo, here at the beautiful Harbor Hotel in Clayton. We'll see you next time on The River, Living the St. Lawrence.
Thank you to our sponsors, Mattress Express, Marble Key Realty, Big Apple Music, Armageddon Arsenal Supply, Tremblay Handyman Services, and Lake Ontario Realty. Serving the region for 18 years, Lake Ontario Realty is once again the volume leader in Northern New York for the 4th straight year. They worked hard to be number one, serving all of Northern New York, including the St. Lawrence River and the Eastern Ontario communities. See them on Facebook and online at lakeontariorealty.com.